Hello. So welcome to the latest edition of the Tank Talk webinar series. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Margaret Dunn. I'm the publisher of Tank Storage Magazine and the conference producer for Stock Expo. Today we have partnered with Varric, who are the global leader in bulk liquid management solutions. We've got two speakers for you today. We've got Derek Blagg and Adam Wishel. I won't go through their biographies because they are on the screen in front of you, but suffice to say they're both leaders in their field. So I hope they'll be able to answer any questions that you may have during the Q&A at the end. Please do use the webinar platform. You're able to chat online, you can ask questions. There are also a variety of polls. We'll ask that you answer those, and at the end, Derek will go through the answers. So I shall hand over to Derek. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Margaret, and hello, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day today to sit in and participate in our discussion. As Margaret mentioned, Adam Wishel is here with me. Adam and I met back in 1997 when I was stationed at Nellis Air Force Base, and he was doing the installation of the automation system for the fuel system there. I joined Varec shortly after that, and Adam and I have worked together on many automation systems over the past 22 years together, probably some of those even at some of the facilities operated by yourselves or your customers. Adam and I don't perform the installations from start to finish anymore, but we are still very much involved in the proposal, the design, the implementation, and support of those systems. And so we stay very close to the customer in the industry at an operational level. So if you're out there working in that area and asking questions, chances are you'll run across the two of us. So a little bit about who Varec is. We have solutions for the oil and gas industry, including the defense and commercial industry. These solutions include software, hardware, and services. You can see from some of the statistics there, we've sold over 750,000 gauges. In fact, the Varec float and tape gauge is so well known and has such a large market share that all float and tape gauges have been referred to as Varec gauges in the industry in the past. I know I would every once in a while be somewhere in the world out at a site and they see the name and recognize Varec and say, oh, we've got Varec gauges. And sometimes we would go to those gauges and then actually be another manufacturer. But there are so many of them out there that all of that type of gauge has been referred to as a Varec gauge. Over the 90 years of time for Varec, we've added automation, advanced gauges, back office systems, and we continue to innovate in the industry and bring new things to the industry for our customers. You can see some of the statistics there and our reach out in the industry in the different areas on that slide. This next slide shows a little bit of an overview of the oil and gas supply chain. You can see the reach of Varec there through the red icons, the different places where we have solutions, hardware, software, and services covered. So you'll see that quite a large area of the supply chain is covered by Varec. Today, what we want to talk about with you all is what we define as the 3 M's of bulk liquid storage: measure, monitor, and manage. We'll talk about measuring and making sure that it's reliable and repeatable. We'll discuss how to select the technology that's right for your facility and what goes into making that decision. We'll talk about automation capabilities, why automation is important and how it can help. And we'll also talk about what to do with all of that data once it's collected from the measurement and monitoring process, and then how we reconcile and share that information out. And then finally, at the end, we'll talk a little bit about where we see the industry going in the future and where we're looking. So first, let's take a look at measurement. The first question that we deal with today is how to select the right technology to measure your inventory. Is hand gauging sufficient? Do you need high accuracy, or do you need a float and tape with a local display? Or does your operation require an advanced gauge like a servo or a radar with a real-time view in an operations center somewhere? There are many options, and there is not a one-size-fits-all answer. There are also many variables that impact those decisions, and those variables will be more or less important for different sites. For example, what does your budget allow for? What type of tanks do you have? Are they below ground, above ground, floating roof, large, small? All of those things go into helping make some of those decisions. In addition, what type of product are you storing? Is it crude oil, refined product? Maybe it's asphalt. All those can also impact the gauge decision. And as I mentioned before, what level of accuracy you need. Are you performing custody transfer? Or do you just need to know if the tank is roughly full or empty? For example, in our arsenal of products, we have everything from a float that sits on top of the product that measures out onto a gauge board on the outside of the tank, just indicating really to the nearest maybe feet or even inches, versus what you'll see with some of the more advanced gauges where we can get down into the fractions of inches and centimeters. So do you need to measure temperature and gravity in order to calculate net volume, for example? Do you have power at the tank? Do you have network communications in the tank farm? And are those communications wired or wireless? And then do you need or want that data in real time? All of those things will impact some of those decisions. So this chart gives a high-level overview of some of the questions to ask when making a measurement device decision, and it provides some answers to those questions inside the chart. For example, you can see on the issue of budget, a float and tape gauge is far less cost than a servo gauge. However, if you require the custody transfer, the float and tape gauge is not an option due to the lower level of the accuracy of that device. You can see that the tank side indication is included with float and tape, but if you select a radar or a servo gauge, you may require additional hardware for that local display, and of course, at additional cost in those cases as well. For tank construction, you need to pay attention to the gauges that require stilling wells and potentially other installation equipment. You see here, for example, that stilling wells are not required for a float and tape or a low accuracy radar. However, you'll most likely need those for the higher accuracy radars, and definitely will need stilling wells for the servo gauges. So you need to consider those when selecting your gauges and when you're looking at the construction of the tanks. Probably one of the most important factors in your decision, I've mentioned it before, is accuracy. What accuracy level is required? As you can see in this chart, high accuracy radars and servos provide the highest level of accuracy. Those gauges can be used in applications for custody transfer due to that level of high accuracy. If you don't need custody transfer capability, you can select gauges with a lower accuracy, and then, as we mentioned, obviously save money in that process as well. The other thing that can be an important factor, as you can see in this chart, is the product being measured. For example, you would not want to use a servo gauge for measuring asphalt due to the fact that the displacer used by the servo must be in contact with that product. So in that case, a radar gauge would be a better choice for that application. A couple other things to consider that you'll see here in this chart is water level, density, temperature measurement, data collection. Some of those gauges include those, and some require additional hardware or a different solution. So those are some of the more important factors to consider when making that measurement technology decision. You should definitely work with a provider or providers to ensure that the solution designed meets your requirements, and make sure that they understand all of those requirements up front. Okay, so next let's talk a little bit about monitoring. So tank farms, load racks, storage and distribution facilities are complicated. No two are alike. Many have similar operations and equipment, however. The back office or the control room where the HMI or the computer system is located allows for monitoring and control of the automated system, of those components that you've selected out in the field at your tank gauges and other places. Storage tanks can benefit from automatic tank gauges, density measurement, temperature measurement, level alarming. Valves and pumps, for example, can benefit from monitoring and remote control, the ability to open and close those valves from a remote location. Load racks can benefit from presets with temperature measurement, maybe additive injection, grounding, and overfill protection systems also, and being able to see that status and that information, again, back in a central control room or somewhere remotely. And then things like weigh scales help with calculating the product receipt and delivery, and then ensuring that trucks aren't overloaded as they leave, And with that monitoring system, you can actually prevent some of that from happening by giving warning systems or maybe not printing out bill of ladings, things like that before folks leave. And then, of course, included in the automation systems and the monitoring can be gate controls, PLCs, programmable logic controllers, remote terminal units or RTUs within the system. Those all help with the communications and the remote operations of those systems. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about some of those and some of those benefits here on the next slide. What are some of the benefits and the advantages of having that operation? So automation and monitoring that system has many benefits that are critical to ensure safe and smooth operations. Automation increases the data accessibility and visibility. It provides for faster and wider visibility of real-time information. And then that data can be stored for later use and analysis. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Receipts, sales, and other product movements can be captured automatically and stored in the automation system. Automation can actually help to reduce costs by consolidating and simplifying operations, helping with the security and providing insight into preventative maintenance. We're going to talk about that a little bit also. The ability to review pump runtimes, for example, that can help with preventive maintenance and prevent future failures and more serious problems. One example of that is Adam has designed some pump rotation programs and logic to ensure the best use of pumps in a rotation, eliminating uneven use. We've had installations at sites where multiple pumps would come on to keep pressure or flow at a constant rate. But what would happen is those pumps would come on 1, 2, 3, 4, and then shed 4, 3, 2, 1, leaving pumps 1 or 2 to run most of the time. And so he's created logic to help with that rotation of that process and make sure that there's a more even run of those pumps, for example. So those are cases where that automation can help, not only from a maintenance standpoint, from a real-time operation standpoint. So in addition, automation can help eliminate unnecessary and missing paperwork, eliminate human error and manual processes, something that can be more repeatable and done more efficiently and sometimes more safely. Automation enables integration of multiple field devices into one system. It allows users to view pump and valve status, flow rates, tank levels, gate status, load rack status, personnel status, all from one location, giving you a total view of that system, sitting either behind a desk, maybe on a tablet or other device where you can view that all in one place. For those operations that allow for unmanned operations, automation can help maintain the secure and safe operations when your personnel are not on site. Gate access, load validations, authorizations, remote troubleshooting can all help provide benefits to the customers and the operators while somebody's not there, giving somebody a view of that system that doesn't happen to be at the site. So a couple of screens we have here for you just to give you an idea about maybe what some of the automation screens look like, what can be included on those. This particular screen is an example of some of the types of data that can be made available for tanks with automation, some of those gauges that we talked about earlier, and some of the other equipment like temperature probes. You'll notice that some data on this screen comes directly from the field equipment, and some is calculated or determined based on that collected data. So some calculations occur. Just for example, you'll see under the measured values, the user can see the product level, the water level, the temperature, and density measured by that gauge. And then if you look under tank volumes, you'll see that gross product volume is pulled from the strap tables. So we take the level and look up the strap tables that are installed in the system, and then with that we can display the gross product. And then also we can do a calculation on the gross volume and come up with a net volume by using the density and the temperature and other factors that might be involved in that process for you at your site. So some of that data can come live in real time from the equipment in the field. Others can also be calculated or use conversions to display that information there. You can also see that there are alarm limits on this page, which allow the user to set limits and then receive alarms if those limits are exceeded. So if you have high and low level limits on those tanks that you want to set as static, you can do that. And we also have seen systems and setup systems where users on a transfer point, for example, and they want to get an alarm when a tank gets to a certain level, either a high level or a low level as they're emptying or filling that tank, and then alert the user to the status of that tank. So those things are all advantages that you can see with some of these automated systems. Now, these types of screens are typically configurable. They allow users to view the data that's most important to them based on the data available from the field devices, based on the needs that they have. Not all data is always available. For example, if the user selected the float and tape gauge that we were talking about before, water volume would not be something that was available from that gauge, but it doesn't mean that the user couldn't manually enter that information into the system. So if you had a float and tape gauge and you had somebody go out and hand stick that tank and get a water volume level on it, systems like this can allow for the automatic input of data in combination with the manual input of data to allow the combination of those two to provide data on what the available product level is in that tank. So those things are important things to consider, and that all goes back to the point I discussed earlier about making a selection of the device based on your needs and the needs of the system. Another screen that we have that to take a quick look at, a little bit different view. This might be the automation screen for a load rack. So here the user and the data that's made available for the load rack automation, you can see that in one view, a user can see if a truck is in the bay or not. You can see what product's being loaded. You can see who the driver is, maybe what the truck number is, and who the company is that that driver is working for. You'll notice on this particular screen there is an overfill and ground protection system there as well, and you can see a visual status of that. And again, just like the tank detail screen that we showed you a moment ago, systems like these can be made very configurable, and you can see things like in real time volume requested, volume loaded, volume remaining, temperature, density, for example. So you can see a real-time view of what's happening out at that load rack if you've got a preset that's installed there and it's connected back to an automation system where you can get a display of that in a control room. So like selecting the measurement devices, selecting that monitoring system and the components that go within that monitoring system should be made with an understanding of what your end requirements are and what you need at your facility. Those are all things that you need to think about as you're trying to make decisions on what you're purchasing and what you're installing as you decide on those systems. Okay, so finally, let's talk a little bit about managing all of that data that you've collected. So inventory management is the culmination of the data collection that we've talked about so far. All of the level measurement and transaction data collected end up on the desk of a fuel inventory accountant at some point. It's their responsibility to reconcile the account and ensure all of the product is accounted for, and then they must investigate any of the discrepancies that they find. There's a few sites out there that still do inventory accounting on paper ledgers, but most that we come across today use some electronic system, whether that be Excel, a solution like ours, Fuels Manager, or another back office system. Sometimes systems are created by the customers themselves, other IT departments, but usually those systems today are some electronic format. And if that system that you were collecting data from, where you've gotten your measurement device and your monitoring automation system data comes in, you can get that in multiples of formats. And depending on the system that you select, they are more or less receptive to those. Levels, receipts, sale transactions, for example, those can all come in from field equipment. They can come in electronic files like maybe Excel. Sometimes they can come in paper tickets or bill of ladings. Or maybe you've got some automated equipment like tablets, handhelds, or presets. And that inventory management system needs to be able to collect all of that data in one location, one place, either automatically or through manual entry, so that the inventory accountants can start that reconciliation process. And the reconciliation process is important to ensure all of the product is accounted for and properly reported to any financial systems or customers. What's important is that the inventory managers have a reconciliation and audit process regardless of the system used, whether you're using something automated, whether you're doing it manually or using it in Excel. You've got to have a system that you can follow. So a couple questions, just as we've asked before on some of the others, is some important questions regards to selecting that inventory accounting system or that process. Are you following best practices? Are there corporate requirements? And do you have a good reporting process out of that? Do you have a training program? This is very important. For your inventory accounting personnel, have you reviewed it recently? I've been to sites over the years where the folks doing the inventory accounting have never been out into the field and don't understand what it takes to gather that information and what it takes to get a level from a tank, or how the automation process works. It's important for those folks to understand that. It helps them when they have discrepancies to go look and find where those problems came from and what they can do about solving some of those problems. So I think that's an important aspect of this that sometimes we overlook. Within that inventory automation process, what processes, systems, and automation is in place to identify errors and discrepancies? Or are you relying only on human interaction or the opportunity for a human to find the problems? Do you perform the inventory accounting daily? Daily reconciliation allows for rapid identification of issues and allows them to be addressed right now. Finding an error 2 or 3 weeks later or at the end of the month, it makes it very difficult to address those problems. Who gathered that data at the time? Who entered it? Was something out of the ordinary going on at the time? Was there maintenance going on? All of those questions can be very difficult to answer days and weeks later. So if you're doing the inventory accounting daily, if you're doing the reconciliation daily, and you find a problem, it's much easier to determine what happened. You want to make sure all the transactions are accounted for. Maybe there's manual tickets or transactions that occurred in a normally automated process. Maybe there was maintenance going on. Maybe there was calibration going on. Maybe there was a tank that was down for maintenance. Maybe there were vehicles that were out of service, pipelines that were emptied that were being worked on, all of those types of things. If you can identify during that process that you have a problem and the accountant has the opportunity to ask questions, people are more readily remember what's going on and can tell them what's happening. Keep in mind, as I mentioned already, maintenance transactions, recirculations. In addition to doing the reconciliation, the accountant should be performing a daily gain-loss analysis, not just going through some of the reconciliation that I talked about and that we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, but is someone signing off on that gain-loss? So not only are they doing the analysis, but is somebody in a management position looking at that gain-loss report, auditing that process and saying, yes, we accept that. Do you have a meter calibration program in place? Are those calibrations current? Are you doing a month-over-month review of the gains and losses? You can have a gain or loss in 1 month, and then maybe in the next month you have the opposite, or maybe it's not as big. But what we want to look for is there a trend? Just like you would look through the month to see if there's a trend going on, you want to look at that over the course of a year or longer, because there's an opportunity to see something happening as you start to back away from that a little bit. Are the tank strap tables certified? Have there been any changes to the tank since the strap tables were created that might change or modify those strap tables? Things like adding gauges to a system or other probes, adding equipment to those tanks need to be considered when you're considering whether those strap tables are current. And then finally, what security and controls do you have around that accounting data? What's there to make sure that it's safe and secure, and that the only people that have access to it are the people that should have access to it. So a couple points on effectively managing that facility is the data collected needs to be accurate, either through automation or through a process that's repeatable and audible. When I was in the military, we had a process before Adam showed up and started installing the gauges where we had to hand gauge the tanks. And still a lot of times today, most companies will require at least once a month that someone hand gauge a tank. I will make the argument that you can be just as accurate with a hand gauge if you have somebody that can repeat that process and follows the standard processes for hand gauging that tank. The automation makes it safer, makes it easier, makes it faster, but there are abilities to do that in a manual process. The key here is it needs to be accurate and it needs to be repeatable. The process needs to be consistent, so gather the data the same way each day. Follow the same reconciliation process. Look for anomalies. So if you have someone hand gauging, for example, make sure that the person doing it the next day is following the same processes and procedures that the person the day before was. If you're capturing that information automatically, make sure they're capturing it the same way. Make sure they're bringing those transactions in, and make sure they're dealing with those in a consistent way and looking for those anomalies. And then, as I've mentioned already, the data needs to be reconciled. Make sure what's measured is within tolerance of the calculated book inventory. And I can't stress this enough, daily. The more often you do that, the easier it will be to determine where you have problems and solve those. So talking a little bit about integrity of the system, you should have a documented and repeated process. I've talked a little bit about repeatable. The process should also be repeatable, but it should be documented. There should be measurement, reconciliation, and audit reviews. Those things are important. There should be management oversight. As a manager, you should understand the process and question those variances. This means the system needs to be easy to understand, and you need to be able to provide quick answers. Managers are busy, there's lots of things going on, and the faster the information can be presented to the manager, the faster we can show where those variances are coming from. The easier it is to show that those variances and alarms, some visual indication of those, make it easier for them to see. The easier it is for them to make sure that process is occurring correctly. We've run some inventory accounting training classes in the past, and I tell people, look for those things that are out of the ordinary. Look for those things that a manager walking by would just see. What's the total daily sales for a site, or what's the average receipts for a day? When those things start to get out of whack, or when somebody sees that something doesn't look quite right, they need to raise the red flag and go look and see what's going on with that. So pay attention to those anomalies. The other thing we tell people is, internal and external audits can help ensure the integrity of that process. Sometimes people worry about the external audits, especially. I encourage people to do some internal auditing, maybe take somebody from a different department or a different area and have them look at that process once in a while. Look at those as opportunities to enhance the process and make things better. And then talking about training just a little bit again, it's very important. And those that use the system, as they become more familiar with the process, you may find that they have questions that they didn't first think of when they were exposed to that program initially. So consider ongoing training and updating that training and taking people back through that every once in a while. Definitely make sure new personnel have a training program they can go through. But again, I think it's important to make sure that once you've gone through that and someone's been using that system for a while, give them an opportunity to ask some questions about it and see if there's anything that maybe shows up that they hadn't thought about previously. There are multiple types of reconciliation. We'll talk about some of those here. You'll see we've got sales. Consider that your sales transactions, if they're being metered out, you have the ability to compare a 24-hour reading on a meter to all the sales transactions that you have in the system. It's a very quick way to look and make sure that you're not missing any transactions, or that maybe those transactions, if they were not in an automated process, weren't assigned to the incorrect meter or the loading location. It's also a way to determine that maybe you have a problem with a meter, looking at those, as I mentioned before, across time and seeing if there are any trends there. It gives you the ability to make sure that you've accounted for all those tickets before you even go through the next process. So it can easily identify those missing transactions or make sure that you've got them in the correct and proper place. We talk a lot with our customers about receipt reconciliation. It's important to verify that what was stated on the delivery documentation was actually received. Measuring tanks before and after a receipt, comparing the physical meter readings, and then again, looking at those trends over time can be a great way to identify potential variances. When product is brought in, either through a pipeline or through a tank truck, there's typically a BOL that goes with that. Verifying that you received that information on the back end side, and then looking at the differences between that paperwork over a long period of time can help with that. We've seen issues everywhere from strap table issues to meter calibration issues on both sides of the fence there during that process. And it's one of the places people spend a lot of time looking at the distribution of product, but sometimes not as much time looking at the receipt of product and the potential for problems there. Most systems require that the BOL, or the documentation of the sending company on the receipts, is the volume of record, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't spend some time verifying that inventory and making sure that what was reported as delivered was actually delivered. And then following on in some reconciliation, we talk about the physical measured level compared to the calculated book inventory. And that's critical on a daily basis. This is where you're actually comparing what you calculate you should have in the system versus what's actually measured out there. Performing that physical and book inventory reconciliation daily gives the operator a much better chance of identifying those reasons for variance. I've mentioned that a couple times, so you can tell I'm very passionate about that. Performing that physical measurement and making sure that that physical measurement is correct, and then comparing that to the book number is a reconciliation that some people only do at the end of the month. And I maintain that that's something that we should be doing on a daily basis or as often as possible. I know some sites are closed over the weekends, but then it's very important to do that Monday through Thursday at least, to make sure that you're getting any problems worked out of the system. When we talk about physical to book reconciliation, I want to make sure everybody understands that book reconciliation, or that book number, is the number that we calculate taking yesterday's physical inventory and adding all the receipts and subtracting all the sales and coming up with that balance. Just like people have recommended for years, I know my parents used to balance your checkbook daily. We should do the same thing with fuel. There's a lot more fuel running through there than we sometimes have in our bank transactions, but very important. Make sure that's done as frequently as possible, definitely more often than just at the end of the month. And then finally, don't underestimate feedback from customers. Sometimes they see trends or they see problems not previously reported. Pay attention to the reported issues and make sure to investigate those right away to ensure that there's no other problems with that system. Because sometimes our customers find things that just happen to get by us because they are also looking at trends, and they may be looking at the numbers in a different way, where they're looking at just their numbers versus where the tank farm manager might be looking at across the gamut. So proper reconciliation and management completes that circle of the 3 M's of bulk liquid storage. It's important. It is as important as selecting the proper measurement devices and automation system for monitoring. Those things all go together, and once you've made the correct selections up front for which device you're going to use or devices, and then once you've selected the automation system that you have in between that, completing that cycle and completing the reconciliation process completes that circle and will provide you with much better oversight, management of that product, save you money, it will save you time, save cycles by personnel. It solves a lot of problems. So now let's talk briefly about where we see the industry going. So forward looking, we see some traditional on-site installations already moving to the cloud for certain applications. For example, we're currently finishing a move from an on-site installation to the cloud for one of our customers on the West Coast here in the US. People will say right away there's 2 big things probably related to moving systems to the cloud: cybersecurity and connectivity. Obviously, both of those things are paramount. They're both important, and they have to make sense for the operation. As we get to a point where we have better and better connectivity, these options the cloud options are more of an option for different facilities. Cost savings, economically hosted solutions can help some companies afford automation where they might not have been able to otherwise. Others may simply see it as a natural expansion as the next step. As the customer that I was mentioning before, theirs wasn't as much about financial issues. They'd had on-site installations before, but their group was looking at it as simply the natural extension and the next step, not having to manage and monitor servers at a local site. There are sometimes cybersecurity requirements by companies that are overbearing just by having a server out in the field somewhere. And so moving those somewhere else is something that they don't have to maintain, they don't have to manage. It takes the IT job away from them and lets them focus on the operation. So there's some reduced capital cost and personnel cost, maybe a reduced total cost of ownership, easier to scale up and down as demands increase. We see a lot of customers that have automation systems at some of their larger sites, but might not have automation solutions at some of their smaller sites. And so moving to a cloud operation gives people the ability to have something that's more like at all the different locations, and then allows them to maybe bring in the opportunities for some of those smaller locations. And that can certainly be a hybrid as well. We have systems that we're working on where we are doing physical installations at local sites, and then we have maybe enterprise type operations where some of the smaller locations are being hosted out of the cloud. Certainly streamlines data management for some of those remote locations. Now you've got all that data in one central location, and it provides web access across the enterprise, gives somebody the ability to view all of those locations and all of those sites from one central location. So that's some of what we see related to the cloud and cybersecurity. Another big thing we see is device agnostic accessibility. Users, as everyone knows, are already expecting mobile and device systems to work. They work on those all day long. Everyone probably on this call has a cell phone with them. We see a lot of tablets out in the field, and they increasingly want alerts, views, and monitoring of their systems on those devices. And so again, considering cybersecurity, considering control of those systems from remote locations, we're looking at all of those types of operations for the future. I think that one, just like the cloud, is maybe not so far off in the future. I think that's very close in our future. And I think here at Varec, at least, we're getting into those areas. Another area that is very near and dear to my heart, and I think one of the areas that we'll see the biggest movement in here in the very near future, is dashboards and data analytics. Dashboards, kind of like the screen that you see here, think of those kind of like the dashboard in your car. They are something that gives you immediate access to very important information about your system. Companies want more data in real time, and dashboards can provide that data. They can provide alarms. It can provide real quick look at information. You see in the bottom right-hand corner there, for example, days of supply. So not only with one block can we tell you what the days of supply is, we can also indicate whether that's a problem or not. Rack activity you see in the middle, things like that, levels, all very quick visual indications of what's going on with the system and whether or not I have a problem. This view happens to show something specific at a site, but as you back out from that, what you can see is an enterprise view where you've got maybe a map of the country and all the local installations there for the sites, and then color coding for any problems that are at a site. So somebody from an enterprise view can have a much quicker look at what's going on at all of the individual sites and where there might be problems and drill down on those. So we definitely see that that's coming. The other thing I'll go past dashboards just a little bit is talk about data analytics. And data analytics is just a little bit different. You need the collection of data to provide the information on the dashboard, but data analytics takes it to the next level. Data analytics takes it to the level where we can help with planning and predictive analysis. Again, I mentioned before, taking that data and stepping back for a second and looking at it across a longer period of time. And that's what data analytics is about. It's about taking all of that data that's collected, all of the temperatures, the densities, the increase and the decrease in levels across time, the pump runtime values, the gains and losses across months and months and months, the issues, the sales, the receipts, and the variances of all those, and being able to take that data and have it calculated and analyzed across all of that data to provide business insights that we might not have been able to get from just looking at hard copied reports. And so those are some of the areas that I think and that we here at Varec think those are very near future. Those are not those items that I all talked about. Those are months and years away, definitely, or excuse me, months, a year away, not years and years away. So we think those are very near future items. That wraps up my part of the discussion. I appreciate you taking time to listen to our discussion on the 3 M's of bulk liquid storage today: measure, monitor, and manage. And at this time, Margaret, I'll open it back up to questions and other thoughts at this time.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Derek. Really interesting presentation there. So yeah, we've had a few questions from the audience. So I will start off. Is there any release date for the Oil and Gas Fuels Manager version 10 in the near future?
So good question, and actually we are going past version 10 to version 11. We have a release date of November 11th, so 11/11 for version 11. Believe it or not, that was not done on purpose. I think that was a happy accident. But yes, next week. And for those that don't know, version 11 of our Fuels Manager platform brings our web-based inventory management solution and our terminal automation and accounting solutions all together into one package. So we're very excited about that, and that will be next week, Wednesday.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Someone else asks, you mentioned the shift to the cloud. With all of the field devices and instrumentation across the sites, how can a solution be ever fully in the cloud?
So great question, and we've been challenged with that as well. So there will be a lot of instrumentation that has to remain at the field, excuse me, at the field level. When we talk about move to the cloud, we're talking about moving the software solutions to the cloud. So the Fuels Manager type solution sits there, and then through secure VPN tunneling, we tunnel to those sites and communicate with the devices at the site. So things like the PLC, the RTU, those remain at the local location, and the local communication is all piped through those and brought back to the cloud. So it's definitely a hybrid installation where the software services are the cloud part of it, and then the hardware services are there. You hear a lot about the Internet of Things. That's the type of technology that we're talking about there.
Okay. Someone else asks, what mix of tank gauges and field devices do you see most often?
Adam, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, I attempted to answer it through the question tab as well. But while traditional mechanical float and tape gauging or even manual operations are still pretty widespread out there, the focus over the last probably half a decade or more has really been towards high accuracy, especially with any facility that needs custody transfer. Now, high accuracy always comes at a higher cost. So a lot of times when customers are seeking high accuracy, once they get kind of a feel for what that price tag is going to be, we usually come back around to a conversation of, okay, well, let's talk about the different technologies. Let's do an accuracy versus cost analysis, and let's figure out what's ideal for the given customer. So, and we'd be happy to have those conversations with anyone who's interested in looking at a change in gauging technology. But I guess the short answer is there is no one thing out there. It's a hodgepodge, and we're happy to work with our customers to figure out what's best for them.
Okay, thank you. We've got a few more minutes for more questions if anyone else would like to ask anything. While we're waiting, Derek, would you be able to just take us through the poll results? Are they what you were expecting?
Let's take a look and see what we've got here. So, Margaret, I'm not seeing any statistics on those. Is there something I need to do to update that?
Okay, well, I can read you out the results that I'm seeing. So for the first question, what are the biggest challenges when making purchase decisions for your facility? And the biggest challenges that we've got is a joint winner between technology decisions and integrating existing products. Would you say that was about right?
Yeah, I think that's true. You know, as cybersecurity becomes so important, and as people look at how much, and I'm guessing with integrated existing products, budget comes into that a little bit, is how do I use what I have installed? How do I take what's already there so that I don't have to start over and make that all work together? And so I think when you're looking for solutions, look for those that maybe do allow you to integrate those solutions. At Varec, for example, we try to make sure we can take the information or the data systems that are out there and integrate them into what we have. We understand the budget consciousness, and we want to make sure that you can take advantage of the technologies that are existing and then integrate those into something new. You'll also find that some solutions, you have to buy the entire package in order to get the full benefit of it. We've taken a different approach to that. We like the idea of coming in simple. If you just simply need tank gauges and you're going to take that information and manually put it into an accounting system, that's okay if you want to add some automation to that later. So Yeah, not surprised about the technology decisions and integrating the existing products. But there's a long history of people installing systems out there. To have to throw all of that away, it just doesn't make a lot of money sense. So I'm guessing budget is tied into that part of it as well.
Okay, makes sense. The next one was which statement best reflects your facility's use of automation? And most people have said that they've got automation in some areas, but not all, with the fewest response saying they have a fully automated system. Is that surprising?
No, not surprising at all. And you know, again, it goes back to the last question a little bit. Over time, people have installed systems, and what we typically do, right, is we look at our biggest problem. Where's the biggest bang for the buck? Where can I save the most money in the automation world? What data is most important to me? And so you see a lot of tank gauges out there. We see a lot, maybe less, but we see a lot of automated systems. But there are pieces of that that are not automated as well. And so again, looking for a company that can come in and provide those solutions and then maybe bring that together is important, because just like what's showing in the poll, we do see a lot of places out there where the entire system is not automated. That's something we would definitely expect.
Okay, and the next one was which do you think are the most reliable and accurate? Automated systems, manual processes, or a combination of the both? And a combination of A and B has come out as the top answer.
Yeah, not surprising. And in fact, we would recommend, and I mentioned that I think in the presentation, look, it's important if you have automatic tank gauges that at some point somebody goes through and does a validation of those. That's true with all the other systems as well. So you definitely want to have a common sense approach to that and make sure that the information I'm receiving makes sense. Pressure transmitters, flow transmitters, things like that that are out in the field, all of the hardware can eventually wear out or you can have problems with it. And so I think that combining that manual and making sure there's still human intervention and involvement in that is important. There's not very many customers we run into that say, we'll set this up and entirely automated and we'll walk away from it. That just doesn't happen. There definitely has to be some manual processes in there. So definitely agree, and we see that in the field as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, makes sense. And then we've asked the audience, do they think cloud services can offer reliable and secure operations? And there's a clear winner there. I mean, everyone has said yes, they do. So I guess that's good to hear.
I think that's changed a lot over the last few years. I think if we go back just 5, 6, 7 years, when some of the sites were having problems and systems were going down, there was some real concern in the industry about whether or not that was a place we could go. I think we're seeing now today that people are much more accepting of that, and I think that feel more confident about it and see the advantages of it. So I'm glad to hear that that's the way the poll went, because I think that's what we see in the industry and with our customers as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we've got another question that's come in. Somebody asks, what tank volume would you recommend going above the tape and float? My tank is 420,000 gallons. Very specific question there.
Yeah, sorry, this is Adam. I'm in the process of answering it in the question message, but volume alone is not a determining factor of deciding what kind of device you want for that tank. It's directly related. Diameter of the tank is really more important, because you take the diameter of the tank and combine that with the accuracy of the gauging device to determine the accuracy of the volume that you'll get as a result. So therefore, you can do that comparison. And a float and tape gauge is typically 3/16 of an inch, or roughly 4 or 5 millimeters. High accuracy radar or servo is 0.5 millimeter. So if you can do the math on the volume of the given diameter tank for that height, then you can figure out, here's how accurate the volume will be, plus or minus this. And then if your company decides accuracy is 1%, 2%, whatever that tolerance is that you're allowed to accept, then you can mathematically determine what gauging devices are acceptable and which ones are not.
Okay, yeah, I think, as I said, it's a fairly specific question, so perhaps you could go back to the person who asked it and talk to them in more detail about it afterwards. Next up, we had a question saying, regarding safety and wireless connectivity, any thoughts on Bluetooth technology?
Sorry, talking to mute, that doesn't help. Question. In 2001, did a presentation to the Airline Pilots Association on Bluetooth technology. And everybody said, what's Bluetooth? Nobody knew at that time what it was, and was not definitely as reliable as it is today. Bluetooth technology has become very reliable. One of the advantages of Bluetooth technology is that it's short range, and so there's some security advantages of that over some of the other wireless technologies. One of the disadvantages is it's fairly short range, so there's an advantage and a disadvantage to that. We've used Bluetooth technology in some of our solutions. We haven't used it as much in the solutions as far as tank gauging and that goes. We've used it quite a bit in collection of data. We've used it a lot with handheld devices, tablets, to do short range communication between devices. So we've had some real success with that. And I personally have seen a big change in the capabilities of Bluetooth over the years. You know, in the last 20 years, Bluetooth technology has come a long ways, and I think is a lot more capable technology to use. And again, you have to consider the application. Is it something that I need over a very long range? Is it something over a short range? Would short range be better for me for a security standpoint? Those are some of the things to consider when talking about that technology.
Okay, thank you. We've had another question asking, how do you avoid tank high level activation if the radar gauge is not working properly?
So typically tanks will have secondary high level instrumentation installed. So you don't want to rely on one device or failure of one device to cause a problem at your facility. Most tanks are installed with a level gauging instrument, possibly a second level gauging instrument, and a high accuracy radar could serve for that, or low accuracy radar, I'm sorry, could serve for that. Or a level switch that is completely independent of the tank gauging in order to give a secondary notification of high level or overfill prevention.
Okay, thank you. I think that's pretty much all the time that we've got for questions. As I mentioned, Derek and Adam's contact details are on the screen now, so if you have any other additional questions, feel free to contact them directly. So I'd just like to say thank you very much. Thank you for the audience for participating in the polls, and thank you to Derek and Adam. Would you like to say the last word, Derek?
Well, just thank you, Margaret, for giving us the opportunity to talk today. Thank you to everybody that came and listened to us. As Margaret said, if you have any questions for us, definitely reach out to Adam or myself. We love talking about this stuff, as you all probably do as well, since you're here. So definitely, if there's anything we can do to help, please reach out and let us know.
Perfect. And you'll be sent a recording after the webinar. Thank you both.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.